You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. This week's episode is actually a continuation of last week's. There, the entire program was focused on a new book, #SayHerName, co-authored by Kimberlé Crenshaw and the African American Policy Forum. It's a powerful, moving compendium of Black women's voices on the subject of police brutality and public silence, as directed specifically toward Black women. With my guests last week, Kimberlé and Gina Best, a contributor to the book, and herself an impassioned writer and spokesperson for the network of mothers who have lost sisters, daughters, and other female relatives to police attack. The book came right up off the page and moved into real life. That show focused on the specifics of the Say Her Name movement. But the conversation was too strong and complex to be contained in that one episode, so it spilled over and on to this week. And we decided to give it another week. Couldn't not. A word about Kim Crenshaw. Kimberlé W. Crenshaw, Professor Crenshaw, is a pioneering scholar and writer on civil rights critical race theory, and she writes on Black feminist legal theory and on race, racism, and the law. In addition to her position in Columbia Law School, she has a distinguished professor of law at the University of California, Los Angeles. Her work has been foundational in critical race theory and in intersectionality, the term that she coined to describe the double bind of simultaneous racial and gender prejudice. She is the author and co-author of Black Girls Matter, Pushed Out, Overpoliced, and Underprotected. And her writing has appeared in the Harvard Law Review, the National Black Law Journal, the Stanford Law Review, and the Southern California Law Review. She's a founding coordinator of the Critical Race Theory Workshop, and in 1981 assisted on the legal team of Anita Hill during her testimony at the confirmation hearing of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. She serves on the Committee on Law and Justice of the National Academy of Science, and her groundbreaking work on intersectionality was influential in the drafting of the Equality Clause in the South African Constitution. Now, we have to take a short break here so that we don't interrupt the conversation once it really gets going, but then we'll be back directly. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
In part 2 of the conversation this week, Kimberlé Crenshaw, Gina Best, and I also discuss critical race theory, which Kim had a major role in developing, and the concept and name of intersectionality, which she created. We also talk about the civil rights movement back in the day, about misappropriating and misappropriations, about the Me Too movement, and about how you keep going when it feels like you cannot take another step. Last week, we were forced to interrupt the conversation on critical race theory, the virulent, ignorant attacks on it, and on the concept of intersectionality, so that is precisely where we will pick up this week. I'm very grateful to you, Kimmy. I swear to God, you just keep on giving. And you do. You really come up with these wonderful ideas like critical race theory. Hello. And although it has
Well,
has
that's a
people,
whole different conversation these days.
I know, but
But,
people get
you know,
hysterical. They begin to froth at the
they get
mouth.
so hysterical. But I tell you the truth, what keeps me going
Well, what
is,
keeps you going, kiddo?
meeting, and having a family relationship with, people like Gina and Rhonda and so many of the mothers and the sisters and the daughters, because there are people who take ideas and distort them, gentrify them, like what's been done to intersectionality, by the far right,
Oh
is
my God.
outrageous. It's
I
outrageous.
just
And
is.
then you have, you know, centrist organizations like the College Board taking it out of Black Studies because they say the term has been, so politicized and so damaged that it doesn't have any value anymore. You say that, and on the other hand, you have women, like Gina, or you have women like the Black women in Oklahoma City who, had the courage to say that a police officer was sexually abusing them.
Yep.
Another classic example of intersectional oppression and abandonment, because when those women testified to what this police officer had done to them, it didn't make national news. We didn't have thousands of protesters who had been objecting to police violence show up, because that was sexual police violence, and that doesn't seem to really count as police violence. And honestly, we didn't have a lot of women's groups show up either, because while this was sexual violence, it was sexual violence by the state. So intersectionality brings the capacity to see that what happened to all those African American women was both police violence and sexual violence. And because it was an intersectional problem, groups that were trained to look only at police violence and groups that were only trained to look at gender-based violence in a narrow, limited way didn't see this as ground zero for their work.
Sure, they stuck right in their little corner.
That's the work that intersectionality does. And, for these other organizations like the College Board to say it's not valuable is basically telling those people who use the concepts to organize and demand accountability that what they are doing is worthless. And that I can't abide with. And I know many of the women and their families that we work with also don't abide with it.
Of course
not.
Of course.
Absolutely not.
So tell me, when are you coming out with how shall we put this? A very simple, written with a large crayon so that their little minds can understand what intersectionality actually is and what it isn't book. How about that?
My sense is that Say Her Name is that book. Because it doesn't make sense to talk about things in the abstract, because their lost lives are not abstractions.
No, of
the
course
abandonment of their families is not an abstraction. It is real, and it is legible through an intersectional lens. So my focus and my center of gravity is the women who are actually coming into view and using this space in order to demand the attention that their loss of their loved ones' lives deserves.
The courage that takes is extraordinary.
Exactly. And so this is intersectionality in action. This is real life. These are realities that have been erased, and we make them visible when we commit ourselves to seeing what is falling through the cracks.
Mm.
So if people want to understand intersectionality better, it doesn't make sense to go look it up in a dictionary. It makes sense to read about the real lives of people who can be better seen through a lens that addresses what we've been missing so far.
Well, you heard it, listeners. It's called Say Her Name. It's co-authored by Kimberlé Crenshaw and the African American Policy Forum with a foreword by Janelle Monáe. And it is Black women's stories of police violence and public silence. And there are all of these stories which would break your heart and sear your brain. Breonna Taylor and Alberta Spruill and Reckon Boyd and Chanel Davis and on and on and on and on. But the thing is, they're not just names. They were people. They were women. They were flesh and blood. They lived, they laughed, they had kids, they had mothers and sisters and fathers, and they were murdered. So if you want to understand intersectionality, don't go to the policy books. Black studies has become ethnic studies. Women's studies has become gender studies. They will do anything they possibly can to mask the reality. Don't buy that. Go for the real reality. This is an extraordinary platform for Black women's voices. It's so moving, and I'm so grateful. Where do they get it, Kim?
They can get it's a Haymarket book.
Mm-hmm.
They can get it from the independent booksellers website, and they can also order it from the aapf.org website. So those are all places that they can find it. And they can also join us in December for our anniversary. We have an anniversary in December every year. And so there will be a performance of many of the passages of the book that were written by Gina and so many of the other mothers, and then a talk back with the mothers. And then we always, when we come together, we do our ritual of naming the names, committing ourselves to bearing witness to their lives, not the worst thing that happened to them, but the lives that should have been.
Yes.
So we invite all your listeners to check out our website for more information about the anniversary of Say Her Name, the performance, and the talk back.
And that website is, again,
www.aapf.org, AAPF for African American Policy Forum.org.
Thank you both. I'm so grateful. Thank you, Gina, for coming and sharing your story and your pain and your intelligence and your rage. And keep it keen all these years later. And Kim, as I say, you're the gift that keeps on giving. You come up with wonderful new ideas all the time. So I will follow you dutifully wherever you lead, my dear.
Thank you so much, Robin.
And I send you
it's
both
such an honor.
I send you both a lot of love. And in this difficult, painful world that we have today, you're a real hope. All of the mothers, all Black women, and I dare say all women following them, to some kind of revolution. There's a way at which when you said something about at a certain point you said, I know, it was the people unable to make the leap of intersectionality, because if it was one thing, then it wasn't another thing, and it couldn't possibly be two things at once. And I thought, and it was sexual, and it couldn't be, so it couldn't be police. And I thought years and years and years ago of a moment in CORE, and it was Congress on Racial Equality. And we were in the New York office, and Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney had been disappeared. And so we were all on tenterhooks, and everybody was a nervous wreck, and they were calling in periodically with news that another body had been found in some lake, in some river, in some wherever. And these were all male bodies. And so they were investigating them. And then they began to find a raft of women's bodies. And they weren't calling for police investigations on those. And I remember stupidly and naively saying, why aren't we calling for the police to investigate the women were murdered, clearly. And one of the guys said, well, those were sexual murders, dear. Those weren't political.
Wow.
Yeah, those weren't political. And I've never gotten over that one. I've never gotten over that.
Robin, I'm curious, with that statement, that was very profound. How do you, and I don't know what your time is at Dr. Kim's, but I'm so curious because I saw, on your website, how do you, with him saying that's sexual murder, how do you see, again, say her name and then Me Too? Because those were sexual crimes that came to the fore after so many countless, mostly white women.
Well, it was started by a black woman. You know that. I mean,
what was Me? Oh, yeah, but Toronto.
And then she got rolled over. Yeah, she got rolled over pretty fast. Yeah.
The thing is, what she did was she created the hashtag, and then when Hollywood started talking about it, they used the hashtag, not knowing that that had already been claimed to focus on, her experience and Black women's experience. So the Hollywood Me Too and her Me Too ended up getting married, but it's not like she started the Hollywood thing.
No, she didn't get a chance to start the Hollywood thing. That's right. So how do I? Yeah.
I would say, I mean, this is a longer thing, but the problem with that was that it was not a grassroots formation. It was a top-down Hollywood first. If this can happen to famous women, guess what will happen to you?
Right.
And because it didn't have deep roots in the long women's movement against violence, it was compromised.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. Although
no accident that it fell apart over their effort to try to protect Cuomo, right? Because
that was so
Me Too itself was
nauseating.
Sort of, in some ways, an effort to protect certain men in Hollywood.
Oh, of course it was.
It's a sad tale.
Yeah, it's a very sad tale. Although I must say, there's something about an idea, which when it catches, it goes on blithely, whatever anybody else tries to do with it. So there are lots and lots of women who now, write into whatever websites are available for Me Too, and then just write on social media. In other words, the secret quote is out. So it in that sense, it freed up those voices, but it eliticized, which isn't a word, them.
Yeah, make it one.
So they were glammed up. You had to be a star before you could have a Me Too experience.
Well, from the perspective of being a mother, and to say her name again, I'm very, very hyper-territorial of the phrase that Dr. Kim has coined, say her name, because I cannot begin to tell you, Robin, how I felt as a mother of a woman murdered by police, 16 plus. Remember, every last one of them had the capacity to de-escalate had they chosen to. That was not even in their cipher. They did not care about the life of India or Angela Perry and the baby, a Black family. Let me just say that. The other part is how when Say Her Name was co-opted after September, I'm going through the whole, because I'm so impassioned. I get just so, when I'm not in a tearful state, this pendulum shifts for me, swings all the way to the opposite. There really
Yeah.
is very little middle ground for me. Less without the eight. Well, anyway, when Say Her Name was co-opted for support of Ashley Babbitt, I had a major.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
Excuse me.
She was stormed the Capitol, and they were saying "Say Her Name" on behalf of Ashley Babbitt,
Oh, for God's
a white
sake.
woman who. Yeah, look into that, please. And I would hope. I mean, this has been great. I always love being around Dr. Kim. I learned so much because I would just. But I can see where there could be a further expansion of this conversation.
No,
because
this
your here is.
This should be reserved for what it's for. It is for the murder of black women by police. Excuse me. How does it get appropriated suddenly? I mean,
it was domestic violence. It was for any black woman who was killed. Say her name, and I understand where that comes from. However, again, I will reiterate: being hyper protective. This is the one space that Dr. Kim created for black women. And again, here we are once again with the co-opting and then the erasure and then the silence. What about, and that's where now I'm shifting. You mentioned at the top of our conversation, Robin, that, it was years ago. I have to say it's always present. It's ever present. Because I'm still suffering from, literally cannot turn this off. There is no pause button, no off switch, no rewind. It's constant, the undercurrent of that grief. And having to walk in a day-to-day life of that, dealing with other people on a day-to-day basis, there's no more space for microaggressions. And for me, the impatience that you're hearing in my voice comes because I am like a walking, powder keg of emotion, but you can't always express that emotion. Hence, again, you're hyper emotional, and then you're not taking it seriously unless you're able to be in a calm state, and then somehow convey your thought.
Who says you have to be serene?
The minds and the ears. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I said, who says you have to be serene? Who dare say that you have to be serene in order to be furious? That's crap.
They've always said that about women.
Yeah,
we're hysterical otherwise. I
know, but we have to kick it aside and go on. I'm not saying that's easy. It's just I'm just saying that comes with the territory. And I think the book is a wonderful testament to the message. And it's just story after story after story, and they pile on one another. And they accumulate strength as they go. And the photos and these women are so beautiful. They're so lovely. It's a killer. Anyway,
thank you for having us on, Robin.
I'm very grateful. And Kim, when you do another book, you got to come back and be on and talk about theory and all those things, but this is the real stuff. I'm very grateful to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
We have to take one last break, and then I'll return with some fighting words and some poetry. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Intersectionality and poetry. Now those are fighting words. Say Her Name is a movement of black mothers for their daughters against a backdrop that historically endows white motherhood with unique social capital. and an understanding of anti-Black racism that foregrounds losses of sons over losses of daughters. As an element of the #SayHerName campaign, the Mothers Network seeks accountability and protection for all those they love. Say Her Name joins a lineage of Black women who have taken on the work to break the conspiracy of silence surrounding the police killings of Black women and girls and to prefigure the world we want to see. Black women's care and concern for their continued victimization and that of others has directly animated the trailblazing work they've done as activists both in the movement for racial justice and in creating the conditions to meet these aspirations. All of which is to say that the work of Say Her Name is not new. As long as Black people have struggled and suffered within the American project, Black women have been there to fight for not only their right to life, but for all of our lives. It's the legacy of that work that Say Her Name seeks to lift up. Doing so helps to reframe the long-standing practices of state violence against Black women into a new politics of solidarity, a politics that takes seriously the degree to which Black women's experiences in the United States continue to exist as stolen histories. These extracts are taken from notes in the first chapter, Breaking Silence, of the book Say Her Name. The traditional idea that motherhood, based on an ideal of bourgeois white femininity, could insulate mothers in the company of young children from state-sanctioned violence has never been the case for Black mothers or their children. The point to stress about racialized gender violence is key to the Say Her Name campaign. Regimes of gender that might trigger protection for white women in the context of policing operate differently for too many Black women. One of the reasons Black women and girls' vulnerability along the preceding lines escapes public attention relates to when and how we see gender at work. A persistent problem in anti-racist organizing, politics, and thinking is the internalization of narratives about anti-Black racism that are inflected with harmful assumptions about gender. At the root of this problem is the degree to which some stories, those principally involving male victimization, are treated as representative of the whole, while other stories involving non-male gendered vulnerabilities become imbued with particulars that render them not really or not only about race. This male-centric way of thinking obscures the fact that discourses about Black men are every bit as gendered as discourses about Black women. Notwithstanding this reality, racism as framed through the prism of maleness has been taken to be archetypal, both within and outside of Black discourse. The end result is that Black men are positioned as the typical subjects of anti-Black racism, a positioning that forwards the notion that Black women are the atypical subjects of such violence. This dynamic is especially salient in how the particular precarity of Black maleness has historically served as a warning to the entire Black community that they are all vulnerable. The brute objective of Black subjugation has long been understood to be the containing, disciplining, punishing, and annihilating of Black masculinity. And so this gendered expression of anti-Black racism became a stand-in for Black people across gender. The male-centric parameters of anti-racism are not the only conditions that contribute to the marginalization of Black women's narratives of police violence. When whiteness serves as the default baseline for some feminisms, the many ways that patriarchy plays out for Black women through white supremacy are also obscured. The topic of state violence, especially police violence against women, has not fully surfaced within mainstream feminist agendas, partly because women as a group are less likely than men to be killed by police, and those women who are killed are disproportionately black. One example of what could be many. On July 17, 2020, a wall of moms came onto the streets to stand between federal agents and protesters in downtown Portland, Oregon. This followed on the unleashing by Trump of federal agents throughout the city, ostensibly to protect public property and impose law and order. And they fired flash grenades and tear gas and beat protesters and made arrests, etc., etc. So, images of these moms, the wall of moms, mostly white women between 20 and 50 years old, hair tied back in ponytails and held in place with baseball caps, linking hands and chanting, "Feds stay clear, moms are here," went viral. One video depicted a wall of white women with arms raised, singing, "Hands up, please don't shoot me," to the tune of a lullaby. When the white suburban moms of Portland valiantly stood up to militarized police, their use of their symbolic racial power in the service of drawing attention to the problem of anti-black violence revealed the continuing salience of white motherhood. The same capital is not available to black mothers, who have often faced indifference when they fought to save their children from police violence. This is not an indictment of the white mother's act of solidarity, but a recognition of the continuous disparity in the moral capital of motherhood rooted in American history. Historically, black maternity signals to authorities threat and perversion rather than maternal authority grounded in innocence and purity. Scholars such as Saidia Hartman and Dorothy Roberts have demonstrated that one of the foundations and legacies of slavery has been the denial of black women's capacity for maternal care. During slavery, this denial manifested in the theft of newborns from enslaved women and the continual breakup of families. In the 20th and 21st centuries, it continues in evidence that black children are at much greater risk of being removed from their families than other American children. Underwriting this violence against black children, families, and mothers is the white supremacist belief that black women do not have the emotional capacity to care for their children when they're alive or to mourn for them when they die. Slavery was built upon a transactional conception of black mothers. It structuralized black motherhood, including through acts of sexual violence, as a source of property. This is not to say that black motherhood was exhausted by that arrangement. The point is that within the legibility of black motherhood, in the context of slavery, was transaction. And if you have any doubts about the transaction of enslavement as an institution, I would recommend, and here I'm stepping outside the writings in Say Her Name, but do read, and I've recommended this book before, The Price for Their Pound of Flesh, with the subtitle, The Value of the Enslaved from Womb to Grave in the Building of a Nation. It's by prize-winning historian Diana Remy Barry, and it is a stunning book which shows chapter and verse how every aspect of the institution of enslavement was commodified, from your teeth to your corpse, from your infancy to your skeleton. The Price for Their Pound of Flesh, and it's by Beacon Press. It's by Diana Remy, Ramey, Barry, Berry. It's a stunner. Okay, back to excerpts from Say Her Name. The transactional nature of black motherhood under enslavement extended. It came into the Jim Crow era. Under Jim Crow, black mothers were transacted to be caregivers for white children under conditions that presupposed black women had no children of their own. Or, equally troubling, that their children could be raised on what remained after white children had been cared for. Underwriting both slavery and Jim Crow was the idea that only white women's, not black women's, attachment to their children should be nurtured and protected. Part of what's insidious about the current construction of black motherhood is that it positions black mothers as embodying the very thing black women have been forced to navigate, transactional motherhood. This is to say, at least since the 1980s, the assumption is that black women have children purely for their own economic benefit, a perverse, vicious reprisal of the wealth-driven model of black motherhood instituted alongside American slavery and carried over into Jim Crow. This vision of transactional black motherhood saturates policy debates today, from the infamous findings of the 1965 Moynihan Report on the Black Family's waning patriarchal standing, to the Reagan-era fabrication of the black so-called welfare queen, to the Clinton administration's abolition of welfare as we know it in the Personal Responsibility and Work Act. And while this dehumanization of black people extends across gender to black men and boys, it takes a particular form in relation to black mothers. For this reason, resisting anti-black police violence requires us to more fully imbue our movement with the particularly gendered dimensions of our history, elevating the experiences and substantive vision of black women that have yet to be fully incorporated into an anti-racist narrative. And I'm going to close with something that's not from Say Her Name, but would have been were she alive today, with the late Audre Lorde, fine poet, and my friend, who called me toward the end of her life and said on the phone, "Do you think we changed them, Robin? I mean, do you think I made change?" And I said, "Oh, God, yes, Audrey. They're changed and they'll never go back." She was a self-described, quote, black, lesbian, feminist, socialist, mother, warrior, poet, who dedicated her life and her talent to confronting all forms of injustice because she believed there could be no hierarchy of oppression. And if that's not intersectionality for you, I don't know what is. And this particular poem is a living, breathing example of it. The poem is from her book, From a Land Where Other People Live, which came out in, I think, 1974. And it's titled, Who Said It Was Simple? By Audre Lorde. There are so many roots to the tree of anger that sometimes the branches shatter before they bear. Sitting in Nedick's, the women rally before they march, discussing the problematic girls they hire to make them free. An almost white counterman passes a waiting brother to serve them first, and the ladies neither notice nor reject the slighter pleasures of their slavery. But I, who am bound by my mirror as well as my bed, see causes in color as well as sex, and sit here wondering which me will survive all these liberations. that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burden. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.